What's going on, guys? So we are out here at the Black Series HQ19, and it is set up at our absolutely beautiful property, which I love being at, spending time at. You know, the family loves to be in the log cabin. I love to be in this. This is such a cool environment to spend time in, and I've had the opportunity to boondock in it a couple times now out on the property at night, and it is super cool. Now, it gets kind of dark out here, so I'm in the process of kind of lighting up the whole area. Anyways, you got LED lights all around this thing, so whenever you turn all the lights on and you put the awning out, it is a really cool place to be. And you know what, I'm thinking of actually setting this little area up, maybe trimming it off with rocks and putting a fire pit out here so you can actually have a true camping experience out here whenever we're in the RV boondocking. Anyways, let's talk a little bit more about this HQ19 and some of the standout things that I mentioned in a few of the first videos, but I want to talk a little bit deeper about them in relationship to the RV industry in general and what companies like Black Series are doing very well that other RV manufacturers should adopt. So hang tight, I'll be right back. Again, guys, it is absolutely gorgeous out here. I love being out here, and it's just such a cool environment to have something like the Black Series sitting in because it's essentially kind of like a park. You know, it's so beautiful. There's trees everywhere. It is such a really quiet, nice environment. If you like bird watching, there are birds everywhere out here. So another really great aspect of having this piece of property. Now, all that being said, let's talk a little bit about the Black Series. So in the first few videos that I did on this RV, I focused in on some of the things that I think they do really well. What I want to do here is talk about the things that they do well, but also things that I think the RV industry in general should adopt, and they probably wouldn't even cost too much for a manufacturer to adopt, such as the windows, right? So I love these European style windows. I've made a few videos kind of mentioning some challenges you may have if you lower the blackout blinds when the window is open. They essentially catch air and they can kind of deform, and you don't want to do that, and there's really no scenario where you would do that. The only reason I showed it was because I was demonstrating the windows and what the blinds look like, and I happen to have them open. But under no actual camping circumstance should you have the blackout blinds closed with the window open, because it just doesn't make sense. And as long as you close the Lexan or the plexiglass part up here down, which is also dual pane, but once you close that down and lock it, you can then close the privacy blinds and you won't have any issues with wind catching them. But these are such a great design of window. They really are. They work so well. They allow so much cross ventilation in. And you know, whenever you look at most RVs and you see that they either have the sliding windows or the frameless tilt-out windows, these are so superior to those. And I'm glad to see a few RV manufacturers that are placing them on the front of their RVs. And there are a few manufacturers here in the US that utilize these windows, but they tend to be boutique brands. Now, I know these windows are relatively expensive because they're imported, but you know, almost all windows are imported, and I can't imagine that they can be that much more expensive than the traditional tempered glass, frameless, or standard windows. And this should just be an option, or at least a replacement for the frameless style window. I love the way they look, I love the way they function, and they just allow so much air to come through, and they have so many great features built into them. So that's one. I really believe the RV industry in the US could adopt that. Number two isn't going to be what you think. It's related to the suspension, but it's not the actual suspension. So this utilizes a coil sprung suspension. You essentially have one large spring per wheel location and then two shock absorbers as well. Now, this is an incredibly robust setup, and it is far and beyond what I would consider to be overkill for most RVs. For an off-road designed RV, it's pretty much what you need to be able to get the articulation you're looking for to allow this to traverse what your tow vehicle may be able to, whether it's a power wagon or, you know, some type of an off-road truck that you have this paired up to. But that being said, there are some really great suspension options that are out there, even if those suspension options are simply reinforcing the system that most RVs come with. For instance, you know, putting the shackle reinforcements in place, putting a better equalizer. I always talk about that, but it still seems as if a lot of manufacturers here in the US see that as an opportunity or a place that they can cut a lot of cost. So you tend to see a lot of travel trailers and a lot of fifth wheels, mainly on the entry-level side, that have no type of upgraded, enhanced suspension equalization. And, you know, if you're going to stick with the traditional leaf sprung suspension, I do believe that that should be an area that they at least evolve and make it better, even on your lowest end units. Because little things like that don't even cost that much, can really help prevent major issues from occurring to the superstructure of your RV. Trim breaking, you know, panels getting warped, or your slides possibly getting out of whack. Whenever you put enhancement there that can mitigate the amount of road shock that gets into the RV, the rest of the RV is just going to benefit from it. So even if it costs a little bit more, even if it's $1,000 more to upgrade the suspension and just make it better and make it better handle. Well, there's an example of the little latch, and that's an area that I don't like on this Black Series, is it does not stop wind from grabbing the door and closing it very well. Anyways, back to what I'm talking about. Even if they can mitigate 20-30% of the road shock that goes into the structure of the RV, it may cost more here, but how much will it save in terms of warranty claims, downtime, and just the inability for you to enjoy your RV because things inside of the RV are shaking apart? So that's another area. Now, one area that I really am critical with RV manufacturers is how they secure their holding tanks. So once you see how Black Series does it, let me kind of crawl under here so you can see what I'm talking about. See these metal strappings that go around, and look how thick they are. They are almost an inch thick in many areas. Let me let you see the suspension that I referenced to earlier. But once you see how well the tanks are secured here, you feel pretty comfortable loading them up with water or having them pretty full as you travel down the road. That's not the case for almost all RV manufacturers in the US. The challenge with RV manufacturers here is if they do secure it better, it's usually putting a little cheap metal strap across the bottom, you know, usually just a piece of tin that goes around the bottom of it, maybe a piece of wood, but in no way is it secured to the point to where you would feel comfortable traveling with full tanks, in most cases. If you do something like this on US manufactured RVs, even if it's not to that extent, but it's secure enough that you know that a tank is not going to fall out or a tank full of water isn't going to bust a strap. If you can do something like this in the US on US manufactured RVs, it would add a tremendous amount of peace of mind whenever you're towing an RV. I think that's a big one. Another one is your wheels and tires. Now, tires has always been a hot topic for me. I love the fact that this RV came with Cooper Discovery LT tires. They put light truck tires on. I know there's this big debate out there whether you should use RV tires or trailer specific tires versus light truck tires. For most RVs, most travel trailers, light truck tires would certainly be a significant upgrade over the junk that's included on most RVs. I get that. On heavier fifth wheels, heavier RVs, you know, RVs that approach 10,000 pounds dry, I would put a high load rated trailer tire on, something that is high quality, has an all steel design to it, because these tires just aren't designed to be able to handle 10,000 pounds of constant load on them all the time. If you have a trailer that has a 6,000 pound dry weight, then you can get away with tires like this. LT tires make sense because they have the load rating to be able to support it. But when you start getting into trailers that are over 10,000 pounds dry, that's where having an actual ST tire that's designed for that weight, or even a commercial truck tire that's designed for that weight, that's really where you're going to benefit from having those types of tires. And I do prefer your higher end brands, but brands like Saloon, even some of the Westlake stuff, the G-rated and up stuff, they've been known to perform pretty well. And, you know, no one can say that any tires, you know, completely immune to failure. There's plenty of LT tires out there that just, you know, they don't hold up very well, or they've blown out on people. So take care of your tires, monitor your tire pressure, understand how much load you're putting on them, especially when you're traveling, and how that even correlates to what you have in your holding tanks, and you'll be in much better shape. But better tires, I think RV manufacturers should just include them. Even if, again, we're walking the price up, once we talk about the suspension, once we talk about reinforcing, you know, some of the tank holds, once we talk about the windows, we are talking about moving an RV price up $2,000 to $3,000. I get that. However, the $2,000 to $3,000 that you put into it early on in this area generally equates to several thousands of dollars that you don't have to invest to repairing the frame of your RV or other parts that are beaten to death because certain things fail down here, if that makes sense. Now, I know a lot of folks, when they see the Black Series, again, they kind of comment that this is how RVs should be built. And in my opinion, this is not necessarily how RVs should be built. There are a lot of really nice perks that can roll over to most RVs, but because of most of the things that have been put on this RV, they're things that absolutely aren't needed and would just simply drive the price up. Let me give you an example. Dual tongue jacks. You know, I don't necessarily understand the purpose of having dual tongue jacks. You have this tongue jack right here, which flips up out of the way. That's the only one I use. Then you have an electronic tongue jack. Do you need two of them? No. Is there an argument to be made that in some off-road scenario it might benefit to have two of them? Yes. Would I ever use this one? No, because I have this one and it works just fine. Parking brake, I actually think that's a pretty cool and innovative piece of technology to include on an RV. It would be really nice if RVs had a switch, instead of having to pull the trailer breakaway switch, but maybe a switch that engages the trailer brakes whenever you are camping. So you simply get out, you hit a button, it engages the trailer brakes and kind of locks everything in place, so there's no chance that it's going to roll around on you, or it greatly reduces the chance that it's going to roll around on you. I do like the hot dipped galvanized frame. I do think that there are a lot of opportunities for frame manufacturers to galvanize their frames. It would definitely help against a lot of the rust issues, but you know what I've seen? Or I guess what I haven't seen. I have not seen a lot of frames that are rusted so bad that it rusts through the actual steel. I've seen a lot of frames on dealership lots that have surface rust on them. Shoot, you can look under a brand new pickup truck and it's going to have surface rust. You can look under a brand new 18-wheeler, it's going to have surface rust. Surface rust isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as it's not rusted so bad that it's actually eating away deep into the metal and eventually rusting through the metal. So as long as it's simply surface rust, most of the time that's perfectly fine. I mean, shoot, you can see fifth wheels sitting in front of homes and out in lots that are 30 years old and they're rusted to heck, but the frame is still pretty solid. It's rusted really bad, but there's no rust going through it. And depending on the climate that the RV's in, rust is going to form all the time. You're always going to have that. Now, one area that would definitely be a more expensive option, but I think it would be, you know, definitely something people are looking for, is a better roofing material. I know there's TPO, there's PVC, there's all sorts of products that manufacturers currently use for their roofing material. And for the most part, as long as you take care of it, you don't rub any low-hanging branches, things like that, it holds up pretty well. But I do believe there's better materials out there. I think aluminum could be better utilized for RV roofs. I think, you know, there's better ways to do it instead of doing it on a big roll. And I think most manufacturers stick with that type of soft membrane because it's easier for them to house multiple rolls of it as opposed to sheets of aluminum. And it simply rolls across the top and it's one solid piece. And again, for the most part, it's pretty tough stuff as long as you don't hit low branches or, you know, unless it was installed incorrectly as well. You know, the two biggest failure points of RV roofs tend to probably be poor installation and contact with something or something hitting it and tearing it up top. If those two issues don't necessarily occur, then you're likely going to have a roof that lasts a pretty good amount of time. You know, as long as you take care of it, keep it clean, get up there maybe once a year, or have somebody get up there if you're afraid of heights and you don't want to climb on top of your RV just to clean it. And it's not really afraid of heights, it's afraid of heights in a wet, soapy environment that you could slip off. Because if you want to end a really good RVing experience very quickly, fall off the roof of your RV and you'll know what I mean. Anyways, there are different areas that US manufacturers can certainly improve build quality. You know, cabinets, for the most part, nobody builds their own cabinets. They assemble their cabinets. They get the parts from another company who cuts them all and mills everything, and then they get them in and they assemble them. There are a few companies that have it internally. There are companies that have manufacturing shops And usually they use the same cabinet manufacturing shop that they may own to produce cabinets for all of the different companies. In many cases, they outsource cabinet making to another company, and they let that company build everything, assemble it, send it to them, or send them the parts and they're assembled there at the factory by some worker. And cabinets, for the most part, are assembled pretty well, but not always. They're heavy, they're bulky, they need to be attached specifically. You need to have your torque on your screw guns dialed in perfectly. You need to do things to ensure that they're going to last longer. So somebody with an RV who may have perfect cabinets may run into somebody with the exact same RV who's had total cabinet failure. And a lot of times that's simply the assembly process, the fact that they didn't install them properly, they weren't installed to backers. So the one area that the entire industry can benefit from is better quality control. Basically, folks at the end of the line who push, tug, pull, grab everything just to make sure it's secure. You can't just take one of them around a loop for a quick test drive to see what's going to fall off, because a quick test drive is not going to emulate 1,000 miles on the road. And in many cases, it's not going to emulate even the 500-mile trip it's going to take to get from, Indiana to whatever dealership it's eventually going to sit at for a couple of months until it's sold. Well, in these times, it's probably going straight to a dealership and then sold, but you know what I mean. If you drive it a couple miles around a parking lot, you might find one or two things that will shake loose. You'll probably find more sawdust than anything, but you're unlikely to find components that have failed at that point. I really do think that component manufacturers, RV manufacturers, and everyone associated to this industry, they need to take a closer look at RVs before they leave the factory, and they need to ensure that one of the 200 people that assembled that RV didn't do something poorly at their station that can cause your brand new product to be stuck at a shop getting repaired right after you spent your hard-earned money on it. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you've enjoyed this video. And again, the entire point of this video is to point out things that I think the RV manufacturers could do better based on what manufacturers like Black Series and what Airstream and other companies are doing pretty well with their units. None of them are perfect. None of them will probably ever be perfect. It is way too much of a manual, hand-assembled industry to be perfect. But some companies are certainly doing things better than others. And I think the manufacturers, especially the larger manufacturers, need to take note of that and find ways to improve the product, improve the practice of assembling it, but more importantly, improve the inspection of these units before they take off from the factory to a dealership. Anyways, I sure hope you've enjoyed this video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.